What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode here on the channel. We have special guest Manny Chee from Manny Chee Outdoors with a broken wrist.
It happens. Not from throwing big baits.
No, unfortunately, from mountain biking. He's more into mountain biking these days for good reasons. The fishing hasn't been that great, but we did want to take some time today to talk about our favorite big glide baits that we've fished throughout the years and have caught tons and tons of fish on.
Yeah.
These three glide baits have been a staple for you.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Even on your guide trips, you
personal
fish these
guide service, yeah, like
They're just absolute staples. So
yeah.
Today we're gonna break down each one of these glide baits, kind of go through our setups, where we fish it, and why we choose one over the other on any given day. So if you guys are ready, let's get right into today's video.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first one that we're gonna talk about is obviously the Deps 250, whether it's the new style or the OG, of course the slide swimmer. I don't know if you've ever
or a
fished
color you can't get, like this beautiful
Right.
bluegill.
And this has been a staple for both you and I from the beginning.
Man. It could have just been called Manny Chee Slide Swimmer's Guide Service.
I mean,
yeah.
That's basically what it was. And if you could get your hands on one of these and you can go out to any of the lakes out here and throw it, you're gonna get some bites.
Yeah, and there was reasons too that I think at least that I chose it over others. Obviously one of them, the soft shell outer, and with the foil inside being the color. So there was never hook rash, and there was never the problem of like, oh, it's so beat up that I feel like I need to send it somewhere to get repainted and take the risk of, changing that, the weight and the action on it. There was never those issues with this bait. So not only was it like the size, the action, the profile that just really made sense, but also the durability and you didn't have to worry about a lot of problems that you had to worry with your typical resin bait that's been painted.
Oh, I mean,
so especially for us, for me, like having clients constantly hit them on rocks and kind of get your fit casting in, that has the durability that no other had. So you spent the money one time, but
you were good.
Until you casted it off, it was good.
Yeah, every now and then I did seem to find that maybe the edges would peel just a little bit, but overall the foil and the skin is way more durable than I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever went through a skin.
Never. And it's one of those baits that if you can get your hands on one, whether it's a new style or one of the original model ones, do it. I mean, I think even to this day you can still get some big bites on this bait.
Oh yeah,
it's still just an
still
absolute
perfect.
Staple of the lure. The action of it is still unbeatable.
It's easy to work, stable.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, from your clients and from people that I've taken out that are kind of new into swim bait fishing, I'll have them fish a wide variety of different glide baits from like the now Clash 9 or some of the other baits out there, and they just have a hard time figuring it out, and they have to see it.
Yes.
It doesn't have the pull that the 250 had. So on for a cast, you can feel like, all right, it just went left, it went right, went left, it went right. I know
your line is moving. You're seeing it flash. You're seeing it turn side. And I think what you mean by like having trouble swimming them is the stability.
Yes.
If other baits like might wash out easier, and instead of doing like a nice rhythmic, straight action, they'd be they wash out on people, which means like it's weird stuff. It's rolling around and doing too much.
It's a bait that you can catch 2-pounders on, you can catch teeners on. You know what I mean? So it's
or loose teeners like that.
Don't do that. But it's just, I know for guys that are just starting out, this is intimidating to them. It's a 10-inch lure.
At first it is, you know
what I mean?
At first that was the big first
this
jump up.
This thing's huge, you know what I mean? But when you look at some of the other baits that we're going to talk about later, this becomes a normal profile. So like, oh yeah, this is like a starting point. This is a very easy meal for any size bass, whether or not you're fishing ponds or lakes or really anywhere else. I fished these baits at local urban spots. I've had fish eat it there. Our main lakes, they fish it, they eat it there. And I've noticed that they don't have to eat trout, even though it's a very thin profile.
Right.
Bluegill eaters will eat this.
Yeah.
Gizzard shad eaters will bite this. It's not just a trout profile.
It's just like when they're on, like even eating other bass.
Yes.
Like it just
matches it so well.
It's a very small carp. It matches a lot.
Yeah. And the action just draws fish to the bait and they crush it.
And after after you throw this and get really used to this and your setup, you go to like 8-inch baits. And you're like, whoa, I might as well be throwing a jerkbait. Like, this doesn't feel like a large swim bait at all anymore.
Once you get over the size of this 250, like you said, you'll go back down to smaller baits, and you're like, you'll look at it in the water, and you're like, this thing is tiny.
It looks small.
It is so small, and it's always funny when you see, 6, 7, 8 pounders eat the 250. You're like, dude, that thing, nothing, nothing to it. And so then you start to think,
and it comes in, and the mouth is like this, and the bait's hanging off, and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, this isn't asking for too much.
Don't be intimidated by some of the glide baits out there that are on the larger side. And I think with these larger baits, especially like the 250, the drawing power increases.
Oh yeah,
right. So
when you first jump into this, you see this whole other behavior from fish that you've never seen with a fluke, a jerk bait, smaller glides. It's just this whole other behavior and this whole other action from them that
it just draws them. So I mean, Deps, they also make smaller sizes like the 145 and the 175. The first slide swimmer I got was a 175. And I fished it, and it was okay. But as soon as I got a 250 and I started throwing it, I noticed right away, like, I was getting more followers. I was pulling bigger fish. Their body language.
And your bait is swimming better.
Yeah, it's swimming
like, it's
way
easier
better
to swim. It works. Like, that size is just that perfect size. It works right. It's easy to work.
And so right away, I was like, dude, I'm never going back.
Yeah,
and ever since then, I never bought another 175.
Right.
Because this was
until we were forced to, for other means or smallmouth or something like that.
But other than that, I mean, this was an absolute staple in the beginning for both Chee and I. And
absolutely. And I also liked that, like, we fished them out the box. I know that there's a million ways that Butch Brown can tune them and change them, and there's a million tweaks to do. Other than like change the hooks after you beat up the first set of hooks, like you didn't need to do really you didn't need to tinker with it. It out the box, and I appreciated like being able to just take one out the box, put it in a client's hands, 8-pounder in the boat, and it's like you can go buy that and reproduce that at your home waters. It wasn't like, oh, you need to be able to do this, and you need to know how to pull out here and take this and tweak that.
No,
like, you could, right? You can do different things to it, and I'm not saying that they don't. Absolutely, all that stuff is real trick and awesome, but you could pull it out the box and go fish it in any waters in the U.S., and you're gonna see this whole other level of fishing that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's a nice thing to have baits like that where you don't have to do anything. Yeah, and out the gate, you can just go fish it, and you can catch trophy-sized fish in your own waters.
So I see this one that you have here. You've changed the hooks to quads.
Yeah, I got quads.
Sometimes at some points, one of the things that I would do was like add another split ring sometimes to them to keep them from maybe popping them off. And then I would fish it just like I see that you've changed your front ring from the stock one that comes on there, the round one. Yeah, which like that's fine, that works. But I did keep with the Japanese, like a brand like Deps, when they design a bait, I don't feel like I need to change something on it or add a snap swivel or this or that. I just fish it again out the box, and I always fished it with like just the standard split ring on the front.
Yeah, and you use what hooks do you use, Dave? 1-out gammies or
just whatever sharp and in the box. I mean, Gamakatsu was some of the last, the bronze round bend Gamakatsus were some of like my favorite, just because they were so sharp and small and like needle like. But I would have confidence in anything. The owners, the Gamakatsus, these quads, like they would all do the trick on this bait.
Yeah, it's just, I think it also comes down to setup, which we'll talk about now as well. And throughout the years, both you and I, we fished the 250 on low down rods.
Low down customs
and
extra heavy. 8 or 8.6. Yeah. It didn't really seem to matter.
But something that was parabolic seemed to be the trick to keep those fish pinned.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when at least when I was first getting into it, we were fishing a lot of stiffer rods.
Yeah, the early days, there wasn't that many options. There wasn't that much of an understanding. I think a lot of companies kind of looked at like swim baits are like the HUD.
Yeah.
And like every swim bait just requires what a HUD requires. And the Huddleston trout is a single hook bait for the most part. So it has different requirements, right? Yeah. And these baits are subsurface, or you could count them down. But basically this bait is like an oversized reaction bait. Like to me is the way I looked at it, like an oversized jerk bait, an oversized topwater, where you had treble hooks. And what's your main thing with treble hooks is a bend in the rod to keep that springing action and to keep the fish pinned on, be able to cast it, right? Have enough of the backbone and the action. And the reason we went with extra heavy is not because it says extra heavy,
right,
or because a brand calls one extra heavy, but it's the ounce rating. So these are what, 6 ounces?
About 6 ounces, yeah.
6 ounces, and you match that with the ounce rating for the rod.
Yep. This is a 3 to 8 ounce, which is most 3 to 8 ounce.
So it's like right in the middle. It's a nice sweet spot.
Yep.
You're not on like the high end or the low end of that rating. You're right in it, and that's why like I went with the extra heavy, and it was the perfect rod for this.
It loads
to keep them pinned, to cast
casting.
It, and to work it. It has the right tip where you're working the bait and you're seeing the spring in the tip that also translates to the bait and to the swim.
And that was a learning curve.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So
the length of the handle.
Oh, it's huge,
that's something that now it's not that unique. A lot of brands are doing this length of handle, but before
it was short.
They'd be short. Some of those other Shimano rods and stuff, like great blank, but not that. It would hurt your wrist. And I just thought like, oh, it's going to be normal that at 40 years old I'm going to have like arthritis in my wrist,
right?
Because it'd be painful. And then the spiral wrap guides on there, which decrease the overall weight of the rod and just put that line nice and like at a bottom torque on the rod once you hook up with the fish and when you're casting. So it felt like effortless casting, and it felt like good fight for the fish.
Yes. So it wasn't like before you would throw a 6 ounce bait and you were super tired.
Yeah.
It was brutal, like, God damn, I got to throw the 250 all day, but it's going to be brutal. Nowadays, you can fish a 250 on an extra heavy rod that's semi-parabolic, and you're going to feel a lot better at the end of the day, where before it was just so brutal to fish a bait like that. And
the rod does all the work for you.
Does everything
you
for
just let it load and let it do its thing.
And I mean, back in the day when the lakes were good out here, I mean, the amount of bites we would get at the boat, right, from big ones. And what those big ones would do is they'd come, they'd crush the bait, they'd maybe give like 1 shake, 2 shake, and then go straight down.
Yeah.
And full force straight down on a stiff rod. I've seen it multiple times where my buddy's like, oh, I got him, dude. Pulled off.
Yeah, it pulls the hooks.
And you're like, dude.
Doesn't break the line. It doesn't, like, you don't lose the bait.
And you're looking at, like, the hooks, like, oh, dude, it has to be bent out. Nothing's bent out. You're like, dude, the rod was just way too stiff.
Too stiff. And you go back and look at your videos when people were using some of those other brands, and you would see, like, dude, that was a big fish.
Yep.
I'm calculating it to be around 8, which was, like, the normal thing we would catch. And your rod isn't, like, doubled. It's, like, barely, like... Like something's wrong there.
Yeah, you can't have that when a fish like that eats that close to the boat.
Yeah.
You're just going to lose a lot of those fish. And so that was a huge learning curve of glide baits in general for us. And it definitely was more efficient having rods and setups like that to throw the 250. Yeah. What reels have you fished them on? I've been fishing them on a Z. I know you used to fish a Z as well.
Yeah, I like the faster, the better, because I've learned the control. Like I've learned how to control it. If you put like a 7 or an 8-to-1 in the hands of somebody new to this, it's much tougher for them to get that right cadence.
Yeah.
And it'll cause the bait to like again swirl around, roll out, wash out, as we call it. And what I used to put new people on was a 6-to-1.
A 6-to-1. Okay.
A 6-to-1 always seemed like that perfect cadence where it's like half of a reel turn, and of course, because we're using these smaller spool sizes with bigger line, when we cast it out, so when it's at its furthest, it requires a different amount of line pickup to get the right speed, which was like a good big half of turn. As it gets closer to the boat, that changes, and then it becomes like quarter kicks that you're doing to get that same action out of the bait because of the amount of line that's on the spool, the diameter. And just with the 6-to-1, it was a very easy thing to adjust to. Right. So that's why I like, again, like the 6-to-1 is very easy to swim, but once you really get it, And once you know what to look for on the bait or what to feel for as far as when you're retrieving it, like the 7 and the 8s are like the way to go once you figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could really move a bait of this size extremely fast if you wanted to get a reaction out of it.
Yeah. If you see them following and you needed to like kick it into overdrive and get them even more excited, you could do that with just a reel instead of having to like pump the rod also and then you know take the risk of like getting hit on the wrong part of the stroke. You could just do it all with the reel, which I always kind of preferred.
Which helps on a long way. Mm-hmm. What line have you been fishing on the 250?
I mean, we started out with mono, big game, because I wanted stretch. Like I wanted stretch in the line for, you know, hook protection to keep it pinned. Moved to like co-poly. Here, you know, our lake's kind of line shyness wasn't a real issue because we didn't have that crystal clarity.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, I can understand how some people would require fluoro for its invisibility and maybe its sinking ability, but I always did great with just like co-poly seemed to be the perfect match for me.
Yeah. I started with big game, co-poly. I now fish it on 20-pound fluorocarbon. I just fish it on a little bit lighter line, just to feel
I think we used to, like, everybody used to kind of start on 25, and we've all gone down to like 20.
Yeah, I don't think you need a whole lot.
Yeah.
Once you feel confident in yourself and your line, and your ability to cast, and all these other things, 20-pound will do just fine. The lighter the line, the better these things will swim as well. Yeah. As well as some nowadays, I see that we like to fish these 250s deeper.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the fluorocarbon does help keep the bait further down in the strike zone a little bit longer as well, as instead of like mono having it come floating up. So there's definitely, it just depends on how you're going to be fishing it.
Your waters. Basically. It depends on your situation.
And so that's basically the whole setup that we fished the 250 on from the beginning to now.
Yeah. Still.
And it's still a staple for us, even though we don't really fish it that much. But it's such a fantastic lure.
If I was to go to any other waters, like I'd pull out that first.
Yes.
And then see how I need to adjust by their behavior. So like, do I feel like I need a bigger bait, or do I feel like I need maybe a smaller bait or whatever? But like,
this is the starting point.
Yeah, that's the starting point. From there, let's draw them up. Let's see how they're reacting to it, and from there we can change. You know, does it need more action, less action, a multi-piece, or what? Like, But from there, it was like a good start on. I would still do that on any waters if I went somewhere else.
Oh yeah. Okay. After the 250 craze, I went after the Hinkle Trout, and this was around 2015 or so. That was back when these things were called unicorns, and they still kind of are, and they're hard to get. And I knew from the very beginning that getting one of these was gonna up the bites I was getting before on the 250, because after a while, everybody's starting to get their hands on these. And the fish were seeing these constantly over and over again. Yeah. So I went over to the Hinkle Trout, and I noticed I was starting to get more followers, more biters from bigger fish than some of my buddies was getting on the 250.
Yeah.
So after that,
it hits the realism of a trout, I think, a little bit better.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, where maybe a fish that starts to really want to get that trout profile, and also like just not just that profile, but like this thinner from the top two. Like there was something about that, and also the tune of these.
Yes,
they were a little different because that faster like chopping action that the slide swimmer that they liked from the slide swimmer, all of a sudden it was a change to experience this one with its bigger size, bigger drawing power, and like more of a hanging type action that like just you kick it and then it could just hang, and they could come up and look at it and they would stay with it longer. It didn't need to like constantly be like raising the level of emotion,
of intensity. Yeah,
it could just be in the water was enough for some for big fish to look at it and be like, whoa. All of a sudden they would key up. Yeah. Or you'd be like, oh my god, bah! You just nailed it.
And dude, when they hit this thing, they hit.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It might honestly just be that profile, but dude, I've had some of the gnarliest bites on this bait.
It's a great tune. It's a great profile. Everything looks super realistic to a trout.
Oh yeah.
And even again, I've used it also. Like I used to take that bait in the early days to Roosevelt, and it imitates like a gizzard really well too. Yeah. Some of those, I think, some of those fish that have never seen a trout were, I think, confusing it for a gizzard shad or just, again, an all-around bait fish.
100%. I mean, I was just in Texas a few weeks ago, and I was throwing this, and obviously there's no trout there. And I was throwing the Hinkle Trout, and to them, they just think it's an 11-inch gizzard shad, which is a normal-sized gizzard shad out there, and they're like, yep, that's a gizzard shad. They're not coming up to it.
And the more like nicks and stuff that you have, like on this one, oh yeah, the other side's even worse. The more nicks you have and stuff, almost looks like some of those, you know, some of those gizzards start getting beat up like that, and it just looks like them too. So you have the swivel on the hooks. You know, it comes already with swivels down there, so you didn't really need to worry about
like double split rings.
Yeah, double split rings or any other kind of system to keep this from, you know, becoming unpinned when a fish ate it. It was nice.
This is a fantastic bait, dude. I still love this bait.
Yeah.
Still my
Andrew
favorite
Hinkle
lure
did something amazing with this one.
It's fantastic, dude. Yeah. When it was trout season, I would most likely throw this over a 250.
Yeah, because at one point it was just, hey, that level of excitement from the fish that we were seeing from the 250 had kind of weaned off a little, and now it was like this whole other level of fish is coming out for this bigger bait. Yeah, with that. You know, like with that excitement.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it kind of like just kicked it back into overdrive of like, oh, man, these 8-pounders and plus are really into this bait.
They're into this bait, yeah. And it's funny because I used to catch fish all the way up river on Canyon on this bait. Yeah. Where there's no trout. And again, it's like they're going to look at this. They're going to see that it's some type of bait fish that's injured. It's got a great swim to it. And they're going to crush it. So you don't have to have trout in your waters to throw this bait. So it's just a perfect size if you are fishing for fish that eat, you know, American shad, or you've got Cisco's, or you have, you know, gizzard shad. And
or again, even maybe just baby bass. Like,
yeah,
you know,
baby bass even too.
Yeah.
And so, like, the profile does scream trout. Yeah. But you don't have to have trout to catch fish on this thing.
Absolutely
just
not.
Like the Huddleston, where you don't need to have trout to throw a Huddleston. It's the same exact thing. And I feel like for a lot of new guys getting into it, they look at this like, oh, why would I ever get that? Right. My fish don't eat trout. They eat this or they eat that.
You gotta remember, they're opportunistic. They eat birds, rats, bats. A chihuahua falls in the water. Like they'll take a smack at
whatever looks good to them and is they're able to get in their mouths. They're gonna try and eat it. And I just think that the swim that you have with a size of this caliber, it's just otherworldly.
It was even more control.
Yes.
Even easier to control. But it wasn't the same like fast cutting. No, I mean, you could swim it like that, but this bait really excelled in a more slow, wide, hanging glide. You could still, and I mean, that was the other thing too. Like, once I started getting into these bigger baits, it was like a whole other level of being able to tease the fish. Yeah. Which like was always the thing that I loved the most out of the glide bait fishing, was the seeing and the teasing and the like reading of their behavior and what they're displaying. Are they, they're moving their fins, they're changing colors, they're like tunnel visioned in, they're dipping side to side, they're coming, fast, or they're stopping at it and you're pulling away. So this teasing where it's almost like playing with a cat versus playing fetch with a dog. It was that teasing fun of it was even more with the bigger bait.
With this,
absolutely. With this one, it was even easier to do, and it was like more of this, bullfighting kind of going on between you and this giant bass.
And I think when they got honed in on the Hinkle, you knew they were going to bite it.
Yeah.
You knew they were going to bite it. I mean, my biggest Hinkle fish was a 9-pounder out of Canyon. Nice. And I threw it down a dock, and I was watching this bait go glide. It's all shade, and I'm like, was that a wake behind my bait? And then it finally comes into view, and there's this 9-pounder just dead on it, just wants to kill it. And I'm like, bro, I gotta get this thing to bite. So I'm running out of room, and I like just glide, and I speed it up just a little, and you can see this fish like getting, and then it just eats it, and you're like, oh, dude, and like, still one of my most favorite fish catches of all time. And even when I was in Texas, the first fish that I caught on this bait, I saw it, right? It came up on it. And I'm like, oh, there's a fish on my bait. And I was able to glide, and you can see that it's like trying to like get it. And then it's like, oh, it just picked up the pace and then came and crushed it. So
yeah, there's so many like fun memories and eats from this bait. And one for us was when Parker and the Lateral Vision guys came out, And it was his first time. He was like, I want to throw like that bigger level of glide. Can I do that? I was like, absolutely, man. Let's throw the Hinkle. And it was the same thing on a dock. And, you know, we were seeing it come in and out. Like, so it would disappear as it goes under the dock. Like, he perfectly casted it in a well presented. It would slide in under the dock, disappear from us, and then it would come out, like poke its head, and then slide in, slide out, slide in, slide out, and in one of those that it goes in, all of a sudden you just see his rod and the swirl, you know, under that dock, and this rod just and 8.5 pounder. Like it was so awesome. Rad. Yeah, there's just so many memories with that.
And on the Hinkle, it does go quite a bit wider than the 250.
A wider glide for sure.
So if you did want to get a cast down a dock, and you might have gone a little on the outside, you can manipulate the bait to where it'll glide, hang,
urge it in, cut one glide shorter,
and
it goes under. And you're like zigzagging your way to the left or to the right.
And that was at the time when Andrew first made this. That was just revolutionary. There's no other big glide bait you could work like that and have such control, and the fish just came unglued for it. Yeah. So it was a fantastic bait, and I still throw it to this day. I don't get as many fish on it, unfortunately, but I still absolutely love throwing that bait. And I think both you and I, we fished it on double extra heavy low down rods. This is the one that I have currently right now, double extra heavy. Parabolic is the action that you'd want because there's two of those, right? There's kind of more of the standard, just regular taper that's more for soft baits and just all around. But the parabolic version is going to allow this bait to be thrown just so much easier. Because it's 9 ounces, 11 inches. It's 3 ounces heavier than that. So it's definitely quite a bit of weight. But if you have the right rod, like the parabolic, you know, low down custom rods, it's going to be heavy. You're still going to get worn out, but it's not as bad as what we used to do back in the day. Right. You know, and it goes back to longer handles. Right. Longer rod, 8'3", extra heavy, and it still has
strong butt section,
parabolicness
with a nice tip
down, and that tip. And I think that's a huge thing in working these glides, like we talked about with the 250, is having that control overall.
Both in the action and in the fighting of the fish.
Yep. And it's really important on, obviously, these heavier, bigger baits because they can throw them a lot easier. Yeah. They can throw them a lot easier.
And accurately.
Yeah. Accurately casting a bait of that size is definitely going to get you a lot more bites than just throwing out. Yeah. Right? And so having a rod of this caliber and quality is definitely needed for these much larger baits if you want to do everything really. Cast, land, fish, and not be tired by the end of the day. So that's the rod. The reel, I think you've also thrown it on a big
This
shooter.
was exactly the first reel that for me came around for the bigger glides, these, you know, plus 11 plus inch, was definitely the big shooter. I kind of saw like just on Instagram, the guys in Japan using these, because at first I didn't know what to use really. The first one that came around for me was actually the Mother before the Hinkle, I think. Okay. And I started like the idea that like, oh, well, let me grab my 400 Calcutta or Conquest at the time. Yeah. And it was just way too slow. Way too slow. Like it wouldn't, the glide wouldn't, I wasn't able to catch up to it to cut it, you know, and control the bait. It was just, it wasn't the right control. So I saw, wait a minute, these guys in Japan, they're using these big baits with the higher speed ratios. Yeah. And in here, it was definitely much more vital to have something faster than the 6. Yes. Like the 6 ratio. The 6 was good for, you know, 6 to 1 or 6.3 to 1, whatever it is. Like those were good for the slide swimmer. But once we moved into these, we needed a 7 or more. Yeah. To keep that control, keep that line pickup, and be able to properly swim these baits.
Yeah, because they're just covering a lot wider glides than like the 250, and you got to be able to pick up that line if you want to keep the cadence correct. Yeah, cadence is a huge thing on getting bites to getting followers, because if the cadence is off, the fish will just come out and follow and like, there's something wrong. I want to eat it, but there's something wrong with it. I'm just not feeling it. With the right cadence of these glide baits, they'll just come out. They'll either just crush it,
they smash it,
or they'll follow it with their fins going, and you're like, oh, there's one on it. Glide.
And you're able to play.
And then boom, they bite it. So cadence is a huge thing, and that line pickup is super big. One thing I like about the big shooter, and that I've loved, is it's a 300 size reel, but it doesn't feel big. Right. It's a low profile. It's super
It's almost like a mix between a 300 and a 400 size. Yeah. Like a lot of line capacity. And for these, speaking of the line, like I started with 30 pound. Like it was like, this stuff looks really big. I don't want to throw it on the 20 or even 25.
Yeah.
They're expensive. They were hard to get. Like, let's put 30 pound on this thing. And this had just a better capacity. And the size was a big thing where it was just perfect, low profile. Still, you could use it all day. Like you did here, we usually switch out, or no, these came with good handles, but you could always switch out handles to like nice bigger handles too.
And so the big shooter, I don't believe they make these anymore.
I'm pretty sure they do not.
Quite a bit harder.
Yeah.
The one that I actually
still
had,
a really good reel to get. And there are other options now, like the Shimano Tranks. And
you have the Tranks nowadays.
The Lexus even.
The Tatula 300s now. But there's just something about this big shooter. And
it's great.
Dude, I've had this thing serviced maybe one time.
I know.
Of all the years. And dude, this thing is butter smooth.
That's ridiculous. I think this was a JDM reel.
Because the other one was the Toro NACL 50.
And like, not to talk bad about them, but it seemed like the US version just had like a quality control issue. Because I'd had some that were really good and some that just fell apart. Yeah. And they were trash. And
every single big shooter.
The Japanese ones seemed like they were all super solid.
Well, I think this one is actually your old one.
That's right. I traded we traded for the left hand. Yeah.
I somehow found a left-handed big shooter, and like I'd caught one fish on it. It was an 8-pounder, and I was like, I don't know if I like this anymore.
Yeah.
And then I was like, Chee, do you want it? He's like, I'll just trade you. So this is actually.
I thought it was perfect for my left-handed clients because I also do like the right-hand retrieves, but it was so hard to find anything with these baits for a left-handed client.
Absolutely.
That that fit the bill of the speed and the size and all. And like that left-hander was a perfect one.
So a little bit of history about this one shooter. But I also, to this day, I throw either a 25-pound fluorocarbon and a 30-pound.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said earlier, our fish out here aren't line shy.
Right.
For the most part. It's not like we're fishing 30-foot,
Yeah, they're not high-vis lakes.
A pool where everybody and their grandmother throws a swim bait. We're talking about you guys out in California, Southern California. And so 30-pound fluorocarbon, you have obviously the visibility thing, but the strength is definitely what you want.
Yeah.
So you're not afraid to cast off a bait, or if you get into a nasty spot and you hook a fish, you have the power to pull that fish out of, like fish in the docks.
And confidence.
If you hook a big one in a dock, where do you think it's going to go? To all the cables and all the nasty stuff down. So you don't want that to happen. So with the setup like that, with the power, the line, the rod, and all that, you can get those bigger fish out of that sticky situation, and you can get them to the boat, which is obviously the most important part.
Yes.
So that's pretty much the overview of the Hinkle Trout, my favorite glide bait, maybe swim bait of all time. I absolutely love this bait.
Yeah.
Okay, and then finally, I think this is one of your favorite big glides. You caught a lot of fish on this bait.
Yeah.
You've had some experiences with this bait.
Right. This. I think like almost for me, this was my favorite.
Yeah.
Like just the versatility. You could fish it slow. You could fish it fast too. Like this one was more a boom, 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 hard hitting.
Yeah.
There was just something about this one like really like
stuck with you.
Fit my style. Yeah. Like it was mean. It was aggressive. The biggest fish that I've caught on a glide bait, I think, a 10 was this. And I've had some bigger that would hit it, things like that. It didn't connect. And then the smallest fish that I've caught, I think, on a glide bait was on this bait. Yeah, it was like a little 1.5 pounder that just railed it super hard at Canyon. So for me, it was like, when I first started like catching some of those smaller, what we would call like 4 to 6 pounders, it was like, oh, if they're eating this, then I have total confidence that any other giant one is gonna eat this too.
Yeah.
And some of my first ones were those 8s and 10, and there's definitely like this one really, it does it for me. And there's something about it. Also, like a nice tune where it's more like a slow sinking, almost suspending.
Yeah.
This one you definitely wanted to use with the silencers. It wasn't so much about silencing the sound, but it was about protecting this outer sharp joint.
Yeah.
You didn't, if you didn't use those, and if you swam a bait with one that had fallen off, you would start chipping right here at that edge. So it's like protection for it. You definitely want to use it with that. And it would come with just a regular adhesive, which would fall off. So we pretty quickly learned to like glue it with something else that would keep that silencer on there longer. And the tail, same thing. Like, you know, I saw cool trick stuff people would cut out with the tail and things, and you could do that, but you could also just fish it standard out the box. You know, I see that you have these nice, you know, system here for like, again, to keep this from binding up and popping off a fish. I used to fish it with double swivels or double split rings on both, and then I always fish this and sometimes the Hinkle with a front feather.
With a feather, right?
Yeah. So like one thing I keyed in on was that when I tied that feather on there, that was the end of me getting these rear hookups. There was nothing more like nerve-wracking than seeing a big fish coming in on one of these big baits on the rear hook. Yeah, that's scary because you just know that leverage is against you. It's easier for them to pop off. And when I started using that front treble, a lot of times from then on, it was almost always a front hookup.
Really?
So I liked that a lot, and that's kind of the only difference I would say that, you know, that I would fish this would have a subtle feather. It wasn't like a big chicken marabou, like obnoxious thing. It was a more, you know, a feather that I tied custom, subtle, but just something that like I would see it. Like it was almost like some of those early fish would come to it and like looking at a big burger that like, this thing looks delicious. I can't wait to eat it, but I don't even know where to start. Like same thing with this. They would look at it and like, oh, I'm going to bite it, but let me just figure out like from where. And when I started with that hook, it was like, oh, that's what I'm going for right away. Boom. And they would hit it up there. So
I think that's probably one of the biggest things with these bigger glides is you want them to eat that front one.
Yes. Right. You want them on the front.
You want them on the front because if you get them on the front, more often than not, the back one will get them somewhere as well. So you got two hooks in them and you have a much better land ratio. That back treble, we've seen it all. And we've lost a lot of giant fish on that back treble. So she's done it. I've also done it in the past with both the Hinkle and the mother. If our fish still ate these baits, I'd probably go back to fish and stuff like that. But you made your own video series on tying feathers, right? So I'll leave a link to that video if you guys wanted to check out how to tie the feathers correctly. Because like you said, we've seen a lot of feathers out there where it's just big old feather and it's like, what is that?
And they were all techniques from the fly fishing world where I knew things like, hey, this is how you get them to not foul on the hook. This is how you get it to stay, you know, durability. There is like a right way and a more like, what are you doing kind of way.
And same thing with like the Hinkle. You can just grab this, throw it, obviously glue down the silencers, but out of the package you can just throw it.
Oh yeah.
You know.
And one thing about the mother too, like at first we were really scared about the colors.
Oh really?
Because, you know, especially at first there wasn't many options and they were pretty crazy colors.
Yes.
Like they were really like Japanese out there, like artistic colors.
Yellow, like,
even their trout, like, you know, weird. When I first do it, I was like, dude, this thing looks like a steelhead in my water. Like we don't have the red band, you know, Canada trout that's like so beautiful to catch and this and that. Like, what is this thing? But it all had a reason, and they were all like done with a very good reason of how the bait rolls, how it flashes, how it shows. And in the end, it was like, give me any color, they all get bit. Like they all shined, they all did great. You know, we caught them on all the crazy colors, and it really just became confidence in the swim, the action, the profile. And just, you know, probably the sound too. There, you do hear it, and you feel it underwater, where it like makes that wood, because this is a wood bait. These are resin, and there was something about that natural wood that just behaves different.
100%. And so my first fish that I caught on this bait came out of the marina. And it was in January, trout eaters, right? And I'm throwing this thing, and a fish, 6-pounder, comes up and eats this thing. And you're sitting there like, why am I going so hard to get the most natural color looking glide baits and soft baits when I'm throwing this all white lure when there's all this fresh trout in the water? And so after that, I was like,
and it looks so huge outside of the water, in the package, but once it's in the water doing its swim, it like loses its giant size.
Yeah, it's true.
It looks like such a natural one-piece swimming, fluid swimming bait.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so how the 250 first looked when I first saw it on the water, this is how this looks now.
Yeah,
it looks like
exactly.
It's a little 10-inch bait, dude. It's super easy for them to fish. Obviously, outside, and you're holding it, it's like, dude, this thing is big, it's heavy. Yeah. But once you start fishing it and you start to see like the drawing power, and once you start getting the first few bites on it, you're gonna know right away, like, okay, this thing is gonna get bit from a lot of different size fish.
And one of the big things too, these other two baits were real good at, sliding and swimming in this like straight kind of pattern. This one has a very different dynamic swim. So like if you've swam the gang crabs, they do this also, where this one doesn't just go like side to side. It's more like this.
Yep.
It goes like in like a frowning face emoji, right? It kind of ends up in this like upside down rainbow, like whoop, whoop, whoop. It has a very different dynamic swim. And with that swim too, one of the neat things that you could do by pulling like twice on the rod, you hit this and then you hit it again, and it was almost like a fighter jet, like dive bombing. You could drop this thing like 5-7 feet down the water column, and all of a sudden some of those fish that were, you didn't want them to be like super high up in the water column with you staring at them, your boat, your gear, we're standing there in our profile. Like when I would see like a bigger fish coming at, or any fish coming at it, I could like do that technique and boom, boom, make this thing dive, boom.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now you're teasing and playing that fish 5 to 7 feet deep under the water. And, or if some boulder or some tree is coming up, again, you can, out there in your cast, you can dive bomb it down, make it go deeper, and then it levels out. And then now you're playing that fish at a deeper level. So that dynamic swim was what really, like, I liked a lot. The ability to really have a more, something not just, fluid, side to side, which is not a bad thing, but just again, just woo, woo. Yeah, this one, when I think I was lucky to be probably some of the first mothers out there were on the end of my line.
Yeah.
And it was like, again, this whole other world, this whole other excitement of the fish that we're like, I have never seen anything like that in my life, and I'm going to stick it in my mouth. Like, I saw, again, I got to see like an early side of this bait that just, not many people were out here making that big commitment to buying this thing, which used to be $500, you know, and again, a whole other, rod and reel setup.
Yeah.
And it was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I got kind of in on it late. I was like the last trickle of when they actually bit big stuff like this, but I could tell, like, dude, the mother could be such a game changer. Yeah. And I remember when you first got that 10-pounder on yours, I was like, holy
Rainy
shit.
Day, hard, tough day, and all of a sudden, lined up against the canyon wall. And this thing just, it wasn't one of those like fun teasing ones. No. It was swimming, and I was kind of like halfway paying attention, and it just came up and just rolled on it. And I was like, oh my God, that thing is huge. And it ended up being 10 something.
Insane.
And that one was one of the earlier fish for me. So it was like, confidence, like
right there, right?
Confidence out the roof in it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. And so my first fish, I was expecting to catch his size fish, like an 8+ on it. Mine was a 6-pounder. I'm like, all right, it can only get bigger from here.
Right.
My next fish on it was a 4-pounder. And I was like, all right, what's going on? But catching that 4-pounder on it was just like,
even more confidence again. Yeah.
I mean, that 4-pounder was maybe like 8 inches bigger than this bait. So I was just like, okay, if a 4-pounder is going to commit to this bait's not big enough. It's too big for a fish. And so when you think about like a natural prey item, whether it be a big gidget shad or if you are fishing for trout eaters, this is the size of a natural trout. 12 inches.
Yeah, it's not it's not out of hand.
Shad,
gidget shad, baby bass, baby carp.
It's only 12 inches. So at the end of the day, this is a foreseeable lure or bait that a fish is going to look at and like, That's something I normally feed on.
Especially
already.
the fish that we're after, those 8 pluses.
Mm-hmm. They eat stuff like
and
this.
And the bycatches, 4s, 5s, and 6s. Like,
and you just,
I'll take that.
Why not? And so, obviously, if you're kind of getting into it and you see the mother for the first time or you buy one, it's going to be super intimidating.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to spend some time. How much time do you think you would have to spend on the mother before you see the results that you're looking for? It's not a bait where you fish for like an hour and you're like, all right, nothing. Yeah. I had to fish mine at least like 10 trips, dude.
Oh, really?
All day, yeah.
And mine was the first trip it started. So, again, I was early on it. The cycle was good. So, the first trip was like, oh, it's on. this is it.
Well, I don't know if you're gonna get as lucky as him, but mine was like the 10th trip, and I got bit on it. But it obviously depends on where you live, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
It could legit be your first trip out with it.
It'll be a good couple of years.
Yeah, for us, I'd have to break my arm off to try and catch one on this. But for guys out there that you guys are fishing lakes that don't have pressure and your fish aren't dead, and they don't just sit in 30 feet to eat crawdads, this is a lure that I honestly think you should give a shot. Nowadays, nobody's really fishing these bigger glide baits, and so you can find mothers for like $250, $300, which is a lot cheaper. You couldn't do that back in the day. Now, back in the day, it was like $450 to $550.
Yeah,
so
unless you were on the program, man.
A lot of people aren't on the program. So, again, it's it's a giant lure, and you do have to get a different setup. I mean, I still
there's something too about just the feeling. When you're out fishing in your waters, the feeling that you have with this confidence of this kind of bait where you're targeting the biggest fish in there.
Yes.
Like now you're playing with fire. Now you are actually you are now targeting the most trophy fish.
Class fish.
Is going to look at this and like, you're a candidate. Yeah. There's something about that feeling that you can't beat.
No.
Like
it's scary.
Yeah. Like you're now with the big boys, you're now this is it. And that's that confidence feeling that the mother gives.
I mean, both the mother and the Hinkle back in the day, when we were throwing baits of that caliber, every cast where you're like on a wall or you're throwing down a dock and you're like, oh my God, dude. And like you're already pitching in your mind like, dude, this fucking 10's gonna come up this way. It's gonna do this and it's gonna bite it right here on the wall. Okay, not that cast. This cast.
Right. This one right here. This one. Watch this. Watch it.
Watch it. Okay, not that one. That one over there. That one over there. And then that was the confidence, though, back in the day. It's like, dude, I could hook into a 10 plus.
If we could have had just somebody standing behind with a camera on the bait over your shoulder.
They would, it would be footage that would break.
Everybody out there would be like a pure believer and be like, I need to do whatever I got to do to get one of these because like the things I saw,
things you've seen, things
the ways that they acted, like you can't beat it.
It's
like it was
unbelievable.
All of a sudden, you weren't bass fishing; you were like fishing for little sharks.
Yeah,
like it brought out this whole other behavior in them that you just don't see.
That you don't see it, especially in like those smaller glide baits, and I think you would say it like they get almost hypnotized by it.
Absolutely.
Where you're standing there, full body up, you got a big ass boat, and there's this fish on your bait, and the fish does not care.
It does not.
He doesn't care that you're there. The only thing that he's focusing
on. Dog looking at him too. Yeah, like, dog watching the bait too.
And you could mess up a glide, and the fish is still like, I'm gonna eat this thing no matter what.
Tunnel vision.
It's you don't get that with really anything else.
No.
I've noticed. And some of those times were just some of the most exciting eats that I've seen, where it's like, this fish just wants to kill this lure. There's almost nothing I can do wrong.
Right.
And then the fish just crushes it, and you're like, holy shit, that was too easy. Yeah. And nowadays it's obviously a lot harder, but those were definitely the highlights. And like you said, I just wish that somebody had a nice camera with a zoom lens and just like, here, watch this cast, dude. Yeah. Watch the bait. Or here's the fish on it. I'm gonna glide it 3 times. Gonna crush it at the boat. And
tracking it.
I mean, that was obviously one of your highlights for a guide trip.
Oh my gosh!
Being like, hey, we're gonna throw either one of these 3 baits.
For years, it was like this was the step up that most people had never thrown. And then, as the times went on, like this started becoming like, oh yeah, this is a staple for most people. And then it was like, okay, now come out and fish with somebody who understands how to work these. Because again, a lot of the like a lot of the mistakes that some people had at first with this bait was to fish it very slow. Yeah. The idea that like, oh, you fish them slow, much, you know, more like the Hinkle, like, you know, not really getting this dynamic, sharp, because this one you could speed up. Like this one you can, you can hit it hard. And again, a lot of people that were going to give up, like, oh, you know, I bought a mother, but I don't have any confidence in it. You know, our fish don't like the colors, our fish don't like the action, or blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, let's tie it on and show me what you're doing with it. All right, let's correct that. Do it my way. You know, the way that I'm, you know, getting them to react with it. This much sharper, accented, dynamic glide. And right away, boom, there it was. Results. Whether it was a 5, 6, 7, 8, you know, whatever. 9 pounders that clients caught with me with this, like it was like, okay, I learned something now. And guys like Bass Jack would then go back home, and we've seen the fish that they've produced with, you know, with this bait. Yeah. Like it definitely was about the swim. Like he was about to get rid of it. He was about to give up on it, and like, this thing sucks. This is, you know, this is not working. Tune up, and then, you know, back to your home waters, and like just change the world.
I think the mother is probably the most underrated of the big glide baits out there.
Yeah,
I just think that everybody wants one because it's the mother.
Right.
But then nobody really fishes it, and you're sitting on a gold one.
Oh gosh.
You know, and like this bait is, like you said, it's completely different from the other 2 baits that we've talked about today, and it has an aura that if I catch one fish on it, doesn't matter if it's a 2-pounder or a 10-pounder, I got confidence in the bait.
Oh yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether or not you catch one on your first trip like Chee or on your 10th one. If you catch one on the bait, it's done.
It's just so satisfying to like come back and see this thing like in a fish's mouth. I mean, this is almost a bowling pin size, you know? Like it's almost like, dude, I just stuffed a bowling pin. I remember one of the early comments on my video was like, dude, that thing's like a bowling pin in his mouth. Like, dude, it is. It's so cool. Like it's so satisfying about just like shove this in your face. Like
just catching a fish on a big glide bait. There's just something so, because it's like, man, this is a large lure. Like we're not going to sit here and deny like, oh, this is a small bait.
These are big.
These are massive lures, right? And then you catch a fish on it and you're like, holy shit, dude, I got that fish to bite. Yeah. This lure, this fake ass lure, that's massive.
Big fake thing.
Like that's so sick.
It's so
and you just
satisfying.
don't get that with, you know, anything else I found. And so what rod do you fish your rod?
So luckily when I had these, like it started with the extra, but then Ben had gone and made me this kind of a prototype triple extra heavy. 8.6, 8 to 20 ounce. And this one, it's so light.
It's super light for an extra.
It's way heavy. Lighter than the double X's were. Lighter even than the extra heavy probably. And so strong in the butt section, but such a soft tip. Yeah. Like such a nice action on that tip, where like this one, I mean, look at that. It was so butter. Like it's just so good. You know, you can fish it all day.
Extra heavy.
Yeah,
that's
you
insane.
could fish it all day. You would pick it up and think like, oh, it's gonna completely like overload this, and no, it was strong. It was light. This rod was just absolutely amazing, and it's a shame that it never really made its way into production.
Yeah.
But this thing changed it for us. Just again, that other level of fishability, accuracy, able to cast it all day. You let the rod do all the work, and you're just, you know, you're pinned behind this, letting it load, and then we hardly ever lost fish on these baits. Like that wasn't a common thing at all. So this was the triple X.
What reel would you have on that rod?
So the early one was again the big shooter.
The big shooter.
Maybe after the big shooter days, it was like the Tranks. Okay. Nowadays it would probably be my Tranks, or the the Lexas. But any of those, again, 7 or higher speed. Okay. And 30 to 25 if you're feeling risky. Like I had no problem going with 30. Yeah. I felt like, 30 pounds fine, I felt no problem. I stuck to 30 on those. And man, this one's seen some.
It's seen some big fish.
Seen some amazing things.
So I've fished it still on the same exact setup, just the double extra heavy. It gets the job done. You're definitely gonna feel it a lot more, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
The mother is about 10.5 ounces. The Hinkle's 9, so it's just a little bit heavier. But overall, the rod still loads it great. Still casts it. Same thing, big shooter and 30-pound fluorocarbon, and that's pretty much all you would need for a bait like this. And so most of my setups are either an extra heavy or a double extra heavy.
Yeah.
And
for a while it was like just that.
It just covers such a wide range, especially if you get into some like those parabolic extra heavies. You can fish baits that are like 3 ounces on it and still feel pretty good on it. And anything below that, I normally don't fish. But that's basically the 2 setups you would need to fish these 3 big glide baits, and that's honestly all you would need. And it's money,
right?
It's money,
which is not
crazy.
It's not crazy. It's just one other setup.
Yeah.
And it opened your world up to this other level. Of baits.
Okay, so like she said in the a little bit earlier, this is the starting point for most of us when we get to a new body of water, or a body of water that we think will eat a bait of this caliber, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's obviously easy to work. It's the right size, so you can fish it in a lot of different areas. You don't have to pull out the double extra heavies. You can just fish this bait, and you're pretty much good for all day to catch.
Durable. We can bang it up.
Yeah, you can do so much different things with this thing. Now, if you start to get some bites on this bait, and you think that like, okay, maybe I can go up in size to one of the bigger glides.
Yeah.
That's when you can play around with either the Hinkle or the mother. Now, for me personally, I always throw the Hinkle when I am chasing after like trout eaters. Like just specifically,
if there was a trout stocking,
I'm throwing this thing just because of the profile. It matches the trout just effortlessly. And I think that the glide, you can fish in so many different ways. You can fish slow, you can fish fast, you can sneak it out, you can fish it high in the water column. And I just think the Hinkle would be the way to go for specific trout eaters.
Right? And also, for me, another thing was docks. I really preferred that bait on the docks over the mother, just because of that more controlled action that it had, and that like almost a wider glide that would tuck in and pull out, tuck in and pull out, tuck in and pull out. And so for me too, like docks or any kind of structure similar to a dock that you may have.
And then for the mother, more open water for me.
Yeah,
if I knew that there was like a tree that's down there,
trees, rock walls.
Just because of the drawing power.
The drawing power and that dynamic thing where you could dip and like hit deeper spots. I had some clients that almost said too that like that they felt like they were getting some bites that were like out of aggression of this thing coming into the largemouth's spot.
Oh, the territory.
Yeah, like a territorial, like what are you doing here? And also like just the size and presence of the bait was enough. Like the size and presence was also action. So sometimes it just hanging and being there in that spot was enough for them to probably trigger that kind of like, get out of here. Like, this is my spot. What are you trying to do here, hunting? Like, boom. And they would hit it with that. So that was something I experienced with the mother too.
Yeah. So that's kind of the difference between when we'd fish one or the other. Obviously, you could fish
interchangeable.
Yeah, but
absolutely.
If you have 2 of them and you want to fish them on
then
like
you
the same
get to really fine tune.
You can fine tune it 100%.
Where and how you like what you're looking for.
Is there a time of year you like more with the mother?
Well, I guess
thought you used to get them pretty good in the spring.
Yeah, it would go into the spring because again, some of those females, they were never bedfish, but they were females that were in the zone protecting the bedfish. Yeah, and that was when on the graphs I would set that highlight to the teen feet, 13 to 19 feet, and I could focus those depth contours with that bait, and whether they would eat it or whether they would at least draw out and then switch like to a slower moving soft bait or something like that. There was something about the mother and that kind of dynamic, like I'm ending up looking down for those beds or something like that, that just keyed off those. Again, we weren't after the males that were on beds or the females on beds. We were after the females that are pulled just off of the bed area, and it's almost like they are hanging out there, like watching and making sure that like something isn't coming that the male can't take care of. A bluegill, a shad or something, like they can handle that. I don't need to pull out for that. But once something of this size comes around, it's like the male doesn't really know what to do. He can't handle it. And that's when it seemed like the female would show herself and be like, I'm here to take care of the situation. Step out of the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was definitely, and there was an orange one, like orange and black. I called it the irritation device. And, that might have something to do with, their eyes are hitting a different wavelength with those brighter colors. That's, also like pissing them off more. Yeah. And it was, I forgot, the Japanese oiyachi, whatever it was like, it was orange and carpy looking. Yeah. And it was just kind of, again, like really toned off the, like, some of the features that you would want to piss off an irritated fish in a bedding area.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I fished the Hinkle Trout in the middle of summer, and I've gotten fish. And so it doesn't obviously have to be in the dead of winter when they're just eating trout, but I fished it in the summer. I fished this bait and the dead of winter as well, and I fished it all. It probably really goes down to just confidence and a spiritual thing. There's some days where I'm like, I don't want to throw this. I want to throw the mother, just an odd chance. And then you fish it, and then you're getting some action, and then you might catch a fish. You're like,
I knew it.
Maybe they're on the mother. Maybe they're on the mother. And I've definitely seen times, I don't know if maybe you've seen it as well, but it does seem like, even though they're very similar, one is getting more bites than another.
Yeah.
Or one's pulling fish more. Or there's just something to it where it could just be profile where they might be looking up at it.
There are some differences in the profile and the real, the realism.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like some of those fish, those bigger ones could be like, all right, there's a huge big profile looking up. They might come up, and then with this, they might be like, I don't know, it just looks different. It doesn't look right. So it could be a wide variety of different things. And so you kind of just have to...
Things that we may not even know.
Right. Yeah. There's so many things we don't know in bass fishing, but you just kind of have to experiment and throw them and just have confidence when you do throw them, because these baits will definitely get you some gnarly bites.
It doesn't take long to get the confidence going when you have productive waters with these baits.
True. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, checking out, and I hope you guys learned something from this long episode of us just talking our asses off about the glory days.
Felt like 5 minutes.
But if you guys have a chance to get any of these glide baits, I highly recommend you guys give them a shot. I mean, a lot of people nowadays have forgotten or kind of dispatched throwing these bigger glide baits, so it could be that era of throwing big glide baits again, how things go in cycles. And so you never know. On your body of water, people might just be throwing those smaller 6 to 8 inch baits, and then you throw a larger bait like the 250 or the mother, and you might be getting reactions from fish that you've never seen before and that people are not getting. So,
and we would even tap into, at that time we had Apache Lake with the smallmouth.
Yeah.
And like my goal was always to get a nice sized smallmouth to eat the mother.
Yeah. I
never quite got it to happen. Sometimes they would hit it like from the mouth forward.
Oh yeah.
And I remember one like grabbed it and was like, oh, and like shook like, what the hell was that? And like he let off and like, I'm out of here. He took off. But the one that I did get him to connect with was the Hinkle.
Oh
there was like a couple big smallmouths that were able to connect on the Hinkle. So
that's impressive.
Smallmouth too. It's not just the largies, it's the smallmouth that there they were getting trout stockings, and they react to it also
100%.
And of course there's always just, you would throw these things and always be like, could you imagine what it would be like to take this to a lake where they haven't seen it?
Right.
It was always like just that allure that like, dude, it makes you want to drive across the country to go find
some water
somewhere where they haven't seen it and see how they react to it.
And get that feeling again.
Magical.
Yeah. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys wanted to check out Manny Chee, I will leave his YouTube, his Instagram down. If you wanted to book a guide trip, are you still guiding these days?
We're still guiding, yeah.
Okay, so if you guys want to book a guide trip,
you're not gonna catch anything, but you can at least learn.
If you want to book a guide trip with Chee, I'll also
eventually
leave
it'll be back.
Email down, and hopefully we'll see you guys out there on the water. Thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out and chase your dreams.
Yeah.